What is the topic for today? Tell me according to your unit, which unit we are starting now?
Ma'am, 4th unit.
And 4th unit, does it has the macro distribution theory?
Ma'am, population and
employment is there.
Okay. Is someone saying something?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, I have a question from Unit 3. May I ask?
Go ahead.
Ma'am, what is the natural rate of unemployment?
What is the natural rate of unemployment? See, you remember that Phillips curve, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And I was telling you that originally the theory which Phillips proposed was a downward sloping Phillips curve, right? And then later on we discussed that in the long run, the Phillips curve becomes vertical. So you call this as short run Phillips curve, SRPC. And and this long run Phillips curve, which is vertical on the x-axis, and there is a point from where it becomes vertical. Now this rate of unemployment, suppose this is 3%. For different economies, it will be different. Now the point at which the long run Phillips curve becomes vertical is known as natural rate of employment. So natural rate of unemployment which always exists with the economy. With a given inflation and population growth rate. So natural rate of unemployment is basically that unemployment which will always exist with every economy. So even if there is a full employment, there is some level of unemployment which is going to exist with the economy, which is natural for the economy in the sense that given a population growth rate, labor force will always be growing, and each and every individual in the labor force is not always employed. There can be different reasons why people are unemployed, right? And economists talk about various reasons. Like it can be due to job search. Suppose I am having a job, but I am trying to search a new job. So because I am trying to search a new job, so I still apply. So when I apply, then I am considered as unemployed. So because of the job search, because of the structural changes in the economy, so there are there can be several reasons because of which some level of labor force, some percentage of labor force will remain unemployed. And economist, who? It is Milton Friedman, and Phelps. These are the two economists, Milton Friedman. These are the two economists who have talked about natural rate of unemployment. So this concept was given by these two economists, and this is known as NAIRU. Okay. NAIRU means non-inflation accelerating rate of unemployment. So I is here inflation, that unemployment which does not create any inflation in the economy, or which is irrespective of the inflation in the economy. So that is natural rate of unemployment. Are you able to get the idea? Although it is difficult, but still, are you able to get it?
Yes, ma'am. Got it.
Ma'am,
Yes.
ma'am, the name is Phelps or Phillips?
Phelps. Milton Friedman and Phelps. Phillips gave this Phillips curve, right? A.W. Phillips gave this Phillips curve. But there are two other economists, Milton Friedman. Milton Friedman, if you remember, it is a monetarist economist. Right? So Milton Friedman and Phelps, they are two different economists.
Ma'am, please narrow
So they
again.
have to,
Repeat.
what?
Ma'am, the full form of NAIRU.
Non-inflation accelerating rate of unemployment. Why it is called as non-inflation accelerating? Because classical economists believed that at the full employment level, there will be no disequilibrium in the economy. Now, disequilibrium refers to any type of situation. It can be inflation, it can be unemployment, it can be disequilibrium between demand and supply, anything. But at full employment level, they believed that there will be no disequilibrium situation. So there will be no inflation, there will be no unemployment. But then later on, in from 40s, economists started believing that every economy has its own given level of unemployment and inflation with respect to the level of technology, level of resources, utilization of resources, capacity of the economy. So different economies will have different levels of inflation and unemployment, given their structure of the economy. So in that context, they have talked about this natural rate of unemployment. So full employment never means zero unemployment. That maybe we have discussed it when we were discussing classical and Keynes also. I must have told you that full employment does not or never means full employment, does not mean zero unemployment. There will be some employment existing always. Even the classical system also, they said that structural unemployment, frictional unemployment will be there. Right? So later on, the structural and frictional unemployment was considered as natural rate of unemployment. Anything else? Any other question if you have? Anyone else?
Yes, ma'am. One more question. मैम
Tell
अगर
me.
मार्केट में किसी प्रोडक्ट की क्वांटिटी डिक्रीज कर जाती है और प्राइस कांस्टेंट रहता है तो उस सिचुएशन को क्या कहेंगे?
फिर से बोलो.
मैम मार्केट में अगर किसी प्रोडक्ट की क्वांटिटी डिक्रीज कर जाती है और उसका प्राइस कांस्टेंट रहता है तो उस सिचुएशन को क्या कहेंगे?
डिमांड डिक्रीज कर जाती है. क्वांटिटी डिक्रीज नहीं, क्वांटिटी डिक्रीज करने का क्या सेंस है? क्वांटिटी किस चीज की डिक्रीज हो रही है? सप्लाई की डिक्रीज हो रही है. ये कैसे पता लगेगा?
मैम प्रोडक्ट की जो क्वांटिटी है वो डिक्रीज
भाई किस किसी पर्सपेक्टिव से बात करोगी ना. Either you will be talking from the firm side or either you will be talking from the consumer side. ऐसे सिर्फ हवा में नहीं बोल सकती ना कि क्वांटिटी कम हो जाएगी. क्वांटिटी क्यों कम हो रही है? क्वांटिटी सप्लाई के फॉर्म में कम हो रही है या क्वांटिटी डिमांड के फॉर्म में कम हो रही है?
मैम सप्लाई.
हाँ, तो फिर जब सप्लाई कम हो रही है तो तुम्हें पता है कि अगर किसी चीज की सप्लाई कम हो रही है और उसका प्राइस कांस्टेंट है तो एक्सेस डिमांड तो है इकोनॉमी में, और प्राइस अनचेंज क्यों है? इसका क्या रीजन है? माइक्रो इकोनॉमिक्स में पढ़ चुके हैं हम लोग कि क्यों अगर किसी टाइम पीरियड पे प्राइस नहीं चेंज हो रहा है मार्केट फोर्सेस के हिसाब से, सो व्हाट इज द रीजन बिहाइंड? इफ प्राइसेस are not changing according to the market forces, what is the reason?
मैम फुल
बताइए.
एम्प्लॉयमेंट.
Not exactly.
Ma'am, government intervention.
Very good. So because of the government intervention, because of the controlled prices, because of the administered prices, the prices are not changing. Okay, because it is controlled. So therefore, when the supply is, if the supply is decreasing, then the price should go up. If it is not going up, there are two reasons. One is that the government is controlling the price. That is why the prices are not going up. Or maybe there is no demand. When the supply is decreasing, it is decreasing because of the demand. So therefore, the price is remaining constant. So there can be two situations. Either the demand is also decreasing with the decrease in supply, or either it is controlled, the prices are controlled by the government. . Is it okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Anything else?
No, ma'am.
Okay, so we will start with the fourth unit, and as you can see, no, Akash, it is Nairu only, right? I does not comes before. I comes after A only because that's how the short form has been made. So if you just want to go according to that, you call it non-accelerating inflation rate of unemployment. It doesn't matter. Non-accelerating inflation rate of unemployment. So it will always remain Nairu. So this fourth unit, as you can see, is talking about some models, right? And these models are related with population. So first, you are talking about this Harvey-Levenshtein theory, and then we will be talking about, see, I missed it again. So we will start with theory of demographic transition. Theory of demographic transition. The theory of demographic transition, although it is very simple, we are in some way familiar with this. Now see this. Here on the x-axis you are taking time. On the y-axis you are taking birth rate. And death rate. Okay, so in short, we will call it BR and DR. So now what happens that in the ancient time period, or in the time period when it was, say, Stone Age, or after some time, the population growth rate was quite high. Why population growth rate was quite high? Because birth rate was very high. And when the birth rate was very high, at the same time, death rate was very high. So the population growth rate was quite high. So we start from here when the birth rate and death rate is too high. And then gradually what happens that So this becomes your dr and this is the br. Now you can see here. This is one stage. This on natural resources based activities. There is no industrialization, there is no education, there is no sources of employment for the people. The low level of income is very low. So the backwardness or the underdevelopment of the country leads to high birth rate and high birth rate and high death rate, because there is no education, there is no availability of health services. So therefore, people, uh, the death rate in the population is quite high. Because of lack of health facilities, death rates are high. And at the same time, because of lack of different employment opportunities, lack of urbanization, lack of every type of social amenities, birth rate is also very high. So this phase is a situation where the population growth rate is almost zero, because the birth rate and death rate both are at the same rate, or birth and death is taking place at the same rate. So the population growth rate becomes zero, because population growth rate is the difference between the birth rate and the death rate. But after some time, what happens that gradually the economy started doing agriculture. If you remember, that's how development has taken place. Earlier, everyone was, when we are talking about Stone Age or when you are talking about ancient time period, people were hunters, or the people used to travel in the forest, gather the food, were involved in hunting, and the life was primitive. So during those years, or during those decades, the population growth rate was almost negligible or near to zero. But gradually, now people started learning, doing agriculture, or people start growing food. So with the uh, starting of agriculture, or uh, with the time, as people started learning, doing different types of economic activities, then gradually the death rate starts declining. Now Now, why death rate is declining? Because now the food is available. Due to agriculture, now production is taking place. So people are able to eat more. So they are able to survive a lot. At the same time, now gradually they know how to build houses so they can reside in a secure place. At the same time, now gradually over the time period, people learn how to cure different types of diseases naturally. Okay, so gradually the the death rate starts declining, but the birth rate is still high. Why the birth rate is still high? Because the level of education is still very low, or the employment opportunities are still very low, because it is only the agriculture where people are involved in. So because of the low level of income, because of the high dependence on agriculture, because of the low level of different types of social services, birth rate is quite high. People are only involved in one type of activity, so there are no other sources of entertainment for the people in the economy. So therefore, number of children who are taking birth, they are quite high. But at the same time, because people have learned different methods to save their life, so death rate starts declining. Now, this is the time period where the medical services are also in their primitive stages. So birth rate is still very high, but the death rate has started declining. And when the death rate starts declining, it declines very faster, or the rate of decline in death is quite high, or the tendency of death rate to decline is quite high as compared to birth rate. So this is the second phase, where the population growth rate becomes positive. Why? Because deaths are less and birth is quite high. So now the population growth rate becomes positive. And gradually you will observe that the difference between the birth rate and the death rate starts increasing. I hope you can see this difference, where there is a huge gap between the birth rate and the death rate. So those time periods when the difference between the birth rate and death rate is very high, that phase is known as population explosion. Population explosion is a situation where there is a huge difference between birth rate and death rate. Death rate is very low, but the birth rate is quite high, and it is reaching a maximum level in the economy. So the fertility rates are very high in the economy. So this situation will be the population explosion. Now, after this, gradually with the increase in education, with improvement in medical facilities, with the increasing urbanization, with the increasing industrialization, gradually the birth rate will start declining. So this is a situation where most of the developing countries or the emerging economies are there, where not only death rate is declining, but death rate has reached a quite low level, but at the same time the birth rate is declining faster. So death rate is constant almost, but the birth rate is continuously declining, which leads to slow growth of population, or gradually a low growth of population. And then after some time, the countries will reach a situation where the birth rate and death rate will again become equal, and they are at a very low level. So this will lead to again a zero population growth rate. Okay. And after a particular time period, the death rate will be more than the birth rate. Like take the case of countries which are becoming older, say for example Japan. So in case of Japan, birth rate is negative and death rate is always positive. And there are several countries where birth rate is becoming negative because people are living in highly urbanized environment. Industrialization is at a very high sophisticated level. Technological development is very high. So preference of people towards children is decreasing continuously. And because of that, the birth rate is negative. Okay. So these are the various phases which have been described in theory of demographic transition. Is it okay? Are you able to understand?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
So I'm not going to elaborate more on this because this is very easy to read. So wherever you read, you will find this explanation quite well. The only thing is that you have to understand that the population growth rate actually depends on the difference between death rate and birth rate. So the time period when both rates are high, population growth rate is zero. When birth rate is high and death rate is declining, population growth rate will be high. And as the birth rate and death rate both are declining, so here birth rate is also decreasing and death rate is also decreasing, right? So the population growth rate will become less and less. Like in our country also, population growth rate is continuously declining. Why? Because the fertility rates are also going down, health facilities are increasing, education level is increasing, urbanization is improving. So higher the level of urbanization, lower will be the population growth. But from here, we try to understand that why these things are changing, why in some time periods birth rate and death rates are high, and why in some time periods birth rate and death rates are low. So, important point to understand from here is population as a boon or bane for development and growth. So population is explained as, or is described as, or is observed as a positive factor for growth as well as a negative factor for growth. So different economists have different views on whether population is a boon for development and growth. Growth means high GDP growth we are talking about, and development means we are talking about uh, different structural changes in the economy in the long run. So population will be considered as a boon for growth initially, but after some time, if the population growth rate is too high, it will create a burden for growth. So huge population is always a burden if there is a mismatch between resources and population. If the resources are less and population is too high, or population is too large, then there will always be growth and development problems. So that's how economists have talked about population as income inducing or income retarding. So population can be income inducing, population can be income reducing also. That is retarding. So we'll try to understand this tomorrow. Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
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 Thank you, ma'am.